know what really makes us mad? Is wasting money on CDs with only one or two good songs.
Yeah. Tell them about punk.
What's up, posers, and welcome to Punk Lotto Pod. I'm your co-host, Justin Hensley.
And I'm your other co-host, Dylan Hensley.
And this is the show where we choose 1 year at random and select one punk, hardcore, emo, or punk-adjacent album from that year to discuss. And today, Dylan was assigned the year 1982, and we will get into that and what that entails in a moment. But if you head to patreon.com/punklautopod is where you get access to all of our weekly bonus audio. Where last week we did a 2-in-1 where we did news of the world as well as I'm Listening, where we talked about the news stories and the music we listened to over the last week. A slightly truncated version because we had 1 day less between recordings than we normally do, so on account of Dylan traveling. So I don't know. We haven't recorded that one yet, so I don't even know how long or how deep we got on that one. So we'll find out. And if you sign up for that $5 tier, that's our producer tier that gets your name said on the show every single week. So shout out to our producers, Dave Brown, my co-host on Bookenders, writer of the newsletter Oklahoma Lefty. Shout out to Zach in Oregon, who started a recent new Instagram called PNW Punk HOF, the Pacific Northwest Punk Hall of Fame, where he is going through punk bands from the Pacific Northwest and writing a little bit about them, posting some pictures and some album covers. So very cool account there. Shout out to Jason W., writer of the newsletter Songs About Chocolate and Girls, who just launched a new series as part of his newsletter called 3 Hits from Hell, where he chooses 3 albums on the list of artists who have 1,000 or less plays on Spotify that he has created. I think he said he's got like 1,100 artists on that list. So that's not running out anytime soon. And shout out to Steve Long, host of the podcast Rebel Nerd Radio. Getting better. If you would like, if you're able to, Steve has a GoFundMe set up right now to put together some funds for his divorce because it was kind of sprung on him. He was not anticipating this to happen. And he's been unemployed for 2 years roughly, so he doesn't have money to pay for a lawyer. So basically he's trying to get some money together to help pay for that. And Steve's a really great guy. Please, if you can, if you're able, I know it's very tight for a lot of people out there who really aren't able, but if you are able to, please consider donating to him. There's a GoFundMe link in our bio, so you can check that out there. And producers get to vote in our exclusive producer poll that determines the episode which determines the bonus extra play audio that we record every month, which we should be doing one of those this month. Within a week or two, we should be doing that one. And we have our $10 tier where you get to choose the album we devote an entire episode to. So all the plugs out of the way. 1982. It seems like whenever we get the 80s, I wind up giving it to you more often than me getting to pull from it. Does it feel like that to you?
I don't know. Not really.
Yeah, I just feel like it's been a minute since I've pulled something from the 80s, but I could just be misremembering and maybe did it like 3 weeks ago. But it's funny how that, whatever rotation we have set up, it is funny how sometimes you'll be the one doing it the same decade twice in a row when we get to it. But early 80s, 1982, what is going on? I didn't really have too much of a chance to look at what you put in the year section here.
So the 1980s, early 80s, I think it's pretty representative of what you think of the 80s for punk music. I think the early 80s are stronger for punk records. There's, I think, more interesting things going on generally. And there's definitely, no shortage of classic records in the early 80s. I've kind of deep dived on 1982 recently, and music in general, I think, is surprisingly interesting in 82. In recent years, like I've looked back at it recently, and maybe sometime last year, I was like, that year was weirdly good, like really, really good, to the point of being probably one of my favorite years in music. At least as far as like what I've deep dived on, and because there's a ton of stuff. So, getting into it, certainly a classic record, a really big deal for this band, and certainly a landmark for goth rock. But The Cure put out Pornography. Right off the bat, that's the kind of heavy hitting records that came out this year. Along similar lines, we've got Garlands by Cocteau Twins. I think that is... Man, is that the first Cocteau Twins record?
I was going to say, 82 is really early for Cocteau Twins.
They go further back than you think.
Yeah.
But, yeah, that might be their first record. I can't remember off the top of my head, but... Bauhaus put out The Sky's Gone Out. Susie and the Banshees put out A Kiss in the Dream House, which I guess that's double duty for Robert Smith, because he would have been... I'm pretty sure he played on that record.
Are you sure about that one? I don't remember if he's on that one. I think he's on the next one.
Yeah, you're right. He's not. He's not on that record yet.
Yeah. This is John Magooch from Magazine.
But I remember Kiss in the Dream House is one of my favorite Susie records. It's a
great one.
When we went through her discography, that one really stood out to me as a really high ranking record. It is the follow-up to Juju, which is, kind of a classic pick. I think controversial opinion, I think it might actually be a stronger record than Juju is.
I would have to disagree with you on that, but I do really like it. I do think it's a really good record. It's a little more shimmery, dreamier than Juju is, and I just like a little bit. There's more of a straight-headed feeling with Juju.
Early 80s, we certainly have lots of post-punk, related to goth rock. And it's kind of an interesting... I feel like there's kind of two directions that post-punk is really going at this point. And I think the stuff that's maybe more in line with what post-punk had been up to this point would be like Killing Joke's Revelations and Gang of Four, Songs of the Free. There's another side to it where I think you can maybe call some of this stuff something else. I think post-punk is kind of at this point of really like splintering off into these different directions. So you've got like maybe a little closer to first wave original post-punk, The Falls, Hex Induction Hour, but certainly very noisy and shambolic and difficult.
Yes. Challenging.
Yeah. Other challenging records and bands. Flipper put out Generic.
We did the Gone Fishing episode real early in the run of the show, and it got us negative reviews because we didn't like that album. I like Generic. I like the first Flipper record. That's the funny thing. I think people misunderstood that I at least hated the band in general. It's no, I just didn't like that record, and I don't know the other records really to be able to tell if I like those. But
I think Flipper fans are kind of I can't even. Most people recognize Generic as a great record, or an important record at least, because it's really kind of a noise rock record more than anything. And it's really one of the first noise rock records. Yeah, I don't think it's really that controversial of an opinion to think that the later Flipper records are not as good.
Yeah.
Or, I guess in your case, you really didn't like it.
Yeah, I really disliked Gone Fishing. I really did not like that album.
I remember thinking my opinion on that record actually changed. Because I had liked it before, and then coming back to it, I was like, this doesn't really work for me. Other kind of deviations on post-punk, Psychic TV put out Force the Hand of Chance, Almost Industrial. Psychic TV was that Throbbing Gristle members, or am I mixing them up? Is that Alternative TV? Is Psychic TV the Jules Holland band?
No, I think Psychic TV is the Throbbing Gristle band. Yeah.
Alternative TV is the Jules Holland band, right?
I did not know Jules Holland was an Alternative TV. I know he's in Squeeze.
ATV,
I know nothing about Alternative TV.
ATV was... It's funny. Alternative TV had Throbbing Gristle connections also.
That's funny.
They practiced at their space. Man, what was the other one? Because, he was in Squeeze. Maybe he just played on something. I don't know. Not important. And a great record, an all-time favorite of mine, Mission of Burma's Versus. Incredible record.
Brilliant album. Why aren't we talking about that one?
Almost. Oh, tipping the bit.
No, I'm not really tipping any bits. I was just why haven't we? I mean, I guess because we've done Signals, Calls, and Marches, and that's why we haven't done Verses, but I'd be cool with doing verses one day. I don't know what much story is left, I guess, is the reason why. Because that's why I was saying, why aren't we doing verses? Because that record's just so great, you know?
And, I mean, that Mission of Burma record in some ways is even kind of like jumping the gun a little bit. And it's sort of hinting at post-hardcore. And we're still pretty early in hardcore. We're in, probably one of the biggest years of that first wave of American hardcore. Huge records coming out. Bad Brains self-titled, Dead Kennedys Plastic Surgery Disasters, Descendants Milo Goes to College, The Misfits Walk Among Us, The Faith Void Split. That's a bunch of all-time huge records in 1 year.
Like iconic, legendary albums. Yeah.
And then even, I think maybe like a lesser tier in terms of quality and importance, but still really pretty important records. Bad Religion's first record, How Could Hell Be Any Worse? That launched a massive, very long-lasting career, minus the brief little period where they broke up.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. That record's a classic too, but it's not necessarily thought of as a classic for this period of American hardcore. Their impact is felt more in the late 80s with stuff like Suffer and No Control, and then that's in part an influence on skate punk, melodic hardcore, and pop punk in the 90s. Like the Epitaph Fat Wreck sound is very much based on No Control and Suffer, but this is where they really started, a lot earlier.
Yeah, and then, we've got stuff by the Angry Samoans. We've got the second Circle Jerks record, Wild in the Streets, which we also got negative reviews for.
Yeah.
We've got stuff from Zero Boys, SSD Control, The Kids Will Have Their Say.
We didn't do that album, but we got other SSD Control comments.
And then across the pond...
over into jolly old England.
We've got the UK kind of doing its own hardcore. It's UK 82, a lot of street punk, a lot of oi. All of this is, it's just kind of like the harder progression of punk rock in the UK. Whereas I think the popular kids went and did post-punk and goth rock and synth pop and, the true punks, the working class, they got tougher, they got harder. Charge GBH, City Baby Attacked by Rats. The Exploited, Troops of Tomorrow. Anti-Nowhere Leagues, We Are the League.
That record's great, too. That album is like a sneaky good album.
We've got stuff from Blitz, The Addicts, The Foreskins. Lots of oi.
It's funny to me that the UK's version of the hardcore explosion is still just punk. It's just like an extension of 77 punk still. It is funny that when does the UK start doing hardcore like Americans? You know what I mean? Like that more aggressive, louder, harder style.
I mean, they call it UK 82, and 82 is really not actually that dense for LPs, I think.
Yeah.
From their version of hardcore, but it does follow pretty quickly after this. We get more stuff like that. And there's one record, we'll talk about in a minute, that is very, very important.
I don't know. I know there are hardcore bands, like what you would consider just like a traditional hardcore band with like really hard vocals. I feel like the UK doesn't even really come close to what American hardcore is doing until maybe the 90s. That's when they're trying to that's when there's like more overlap in sound.
Yeah, I mean, well, we have like crust and anarcho-punk stuff, and they're really, I mean, they're doing some death rock as well in 82, and I mean, mid 80s, anarcho-punk just eventually turns into grindcore, so they get heavier later.
Yeah, I guess they actually wind up surpassing.
Yeah,
with grindcore being a UK genre. And the style of vocals in grindcore have more in common with modern hardcore than 80s hardcore. So that is funny. I guess, yeah, grind might be their version of being like, all right, now we're real heavy now.
And the other really, really big genre to talk about. New wave is still kind of a thing. You can kind of still categorize records as new wave. It hasn't totally splintered off into, synth pop and what I think really kind of dominates the 80s and what was, the direct descendant of new wave. You have a lot of stuff here that has sort of that power pop and rock and punk and ska influence still, to where you can kind of tie it to that, late 70s new wave sound. The Clash's combat rock, XTC's English Settlement. We've got Oingo Boingo's Nothing to Fear. We've got Psychedelic Furs, Forever Now. The Jam basically does a full-on new wave record and then breaks up. Midnight Oil's first album? Might be second.
Maybe second, yeah.
Early for them. 10-9-8-7-6-5-4-3-2-1, which is so irritating to type out.
And say.
Yeah. Easier to say. Typing it out and putting the commas in there is really annoying.
It's like when I've been doing the ha 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 posts for social media. Like, it's just annoying to have to do the exclamation points after every word.
We've got Go-Go's Vacation. The Waitresses Wasn't Tomorrow Wonderful. Friend or Foe by Adam Ant. So getting into your new romantics. Flock of Seagulls self-titled record. There's your, going in that synth pop direction. Devo's Oh No, It's Devo. A record I briefly considered, Altered Images, Pinky Blue. I love that record.
It's good. It's a fun record. Yeah, I wouldn't mind doing an Altered Images album at some point. They only have the two. Well, they actually do. They have a later one, but there's only two that anybody cares about.
Yeah. The one with Happy Birthday, is that actually an album song, or is that a...
Yeah, it's an album cut. It's the next one. It's not pink. It's the one that looks like... It's like
is
a
the
white
album
cover.
called Happy Birthday?
Is it?
No, Happy Birthday was the first record. Oh, wow. I thought it was the one after.
Pinky Blue's the second. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I had them backwards. You know what? We do the birthday spanking every year. I don't know why I didn't think before to just put Happy Birthday as the opening theme for those special episodes.
Yeah, I don't know why. Yeah, that seems really obvious.
I don't know why I didn't even think of that before. Because I just did the regular intro. I have to remember it for this year's birthday spankings.
Kind of the next big thing in the UK is starting to form here. And we've got some jangle pop and some jangle-related records. I don't know that I would fully classify Orange Juice as a jangle pop band, but I also don't know what I would really call Orange Juice.
It's just a version of post-punk. Yeah.
Felt put out Crumbling the Antiseptic Beauty. Sad Lovers and Giants put out Epic Garden Music. The Church put out The Blurred Crusade. We've got like 2 Cleaners from Venus Records. And I don't even think the Smiths is a band yet. So, Johnny Come Latelys.
Predating.
Formed in 82.
Okay. Yeah. You know how the UK is, though? It could be a case of, like, they were first, but then all these bands just got in the studio and cranked one out before them, too. Weird how that happened in the UK way more than it ever happened in the US.
I don't know. The Smiths didn't have any singles even until 83, so...
Yeah.
I think this sound was already on its way.
Yeah. Yeah, because even, like, the US and Australia have their own versions of it, too. Well, you had a few other options that you were considering to choose from, and when I saw the list that you sent me, one, I was very confused, especially on one pick in particular, where I was like, who are you, and how did you replace Dylan? Because, what? So, what did you almost pick for us to talk about?
So, I almost considered and was very close to picking this one. Discharge is Hear Nothing, See Nothing, Say Nothing. It's a record that's a really good record. I've definitely listened to it before, and it was really interesting to me and standing out to me because it's a field of punk we don't venture into all that often.
Yeah.
And it is probably the best UK 82 record. It's definitely the most important D-beat record ever made. It's pretty much the first LP in the genre, and Discharge created the genre.
There's a reason why like all the D-beat bands start with dis something as well.
It's been a little while since I've heard this record, but I remember enjoying it, and it's the one to do.
Right. From Discharge, absolutely, is the one to do. And to be fair, well, okay, the one we're talking about today is a big one too. So, but I would say that maybe the Discharge record would have been the most important one to cover out of the batch you nominated, at least.
We'll get there eventually. I think the next time I come back to this year, if I'm picking, I might pick this record.
Yeah.
I considered Funboy 3's FB3. I don't entirely know why this one stood out to me, but I think mostly it was just because I was initially looking for records that I was less familiar with, or had not heard, or had not rated at least. And I think when I deep dived on this year, I skipped over this one for whatever reason.
Is it because Funboy 3 doesn't have the best reputation?
Yeah.
It's the post-specials band, right? It's like 3 of the specials.
Yeah. It's their, what's the English Beat version? Where they fired everybody and started a new wave band?
Oh, General Public?
Yeah.
I was even thinking, too, of the Big Audio Dynamite.
Oh, right.
The Clash version of the same thing.
Yeah.
And then there's Big Audio Dynamite 2, which is like it's just a different band. It's like, what? But also still Mick Jones.
But yeah, I passed over this one pretty quickly.
I was going to say, I'm glad you did, because that would have been, I think that would not have been a very fun record to listen to.
And lastly, I considered Millions of Dead Cops by MDC.
This is the one I was like, what? We've talked before about how much we do not really care for MDC, and which that also got us negative reviews at the time, even though we've yet to cover one of their albums. I will say, great album cover, though.
Yeah, I love that album cover.
It's such a good
always
cover.
Made me want to like it. I've never actually listened to this record, though.
No.
So, but they've just never really appealed to me in the past, so, yeah.
Because anytime I've heard them, I did not like them at all. It was like, yeah, they're an early American hardcore band, but they just did it in a way that I don't like it. They're not a New York band; they're a Texas band.
They're a Texas band that moved to San Francisco.
Yeah, but anytime I've ever heard them, I'm just like, oh, this feels like the kind of stuff that actually influenced New York hardcore, because it's just like dumb, ugly sounding.
Yeah, it's just they aren't actually dumb though. Like that's the thing.
Yeah, I mean, they made their entire career out of being anti-cop, which is pretty great. I mean, and the problem with them, though, is, too, they have changed their name a million times throughout the years, and the lineups, there's probably been like 100 people in this band. It's very much like the UK subs. It's just like, there's probably one constant person throughout the whole, like, 25-year or 20 LP catalog or whatever.
Yeah, I don't know. It's a record that I feel like I need to give a fair shake to. You know, I think they've had consistently good politics. I think they're kind of a key text for a lot of the political hardcore that, you know, we're fans of, you know. Certainly have influenced people like Dan Yemin. And, yeah, I need to give it a real proper listen, but not this time.
I feel like I have listened to it before, and I didn't like it. And also, when you said, like, oh, they've always had good politics, and now we'll get somebody in the Discord to be like, did you miss this story?
Yeah. What I know of their politics looks pretty good, but...
Yeah.
I mean,
well, what
you know, we've considered Bad Brains records multiple times, and MDC and Bad Brains directly had beef.
Yeah.
For HR being a homophobe.
Yeah, it seems like a lot of people had a problem with that. Which... Yeah.
They should.
They should. Yeah, they should. I mean, but even in the 80s, it's kind of impressive that the scene had a problem with it, which is pretty cool. Kind of shows you, like, in general, the politics of hardcore and punk in the U.S. It was pretty good for the most part. There's obviously shitheads, and, you know, there's a Fear record this year, you know. Leaving fucking sucks. You know, he's like one of the famous Republican punks. So, Johnny Ramone's, you know, Ben Weasel, you know, there's shitheads in punk. There always have been, but I say as a whole, it tends to be more left leaning, and they don't really stand for a lot of homophobia and racism. At this point, there's some backsliding that happens in the 90s, I feel like, but well, we gave you the year 1982, and what did you select for us to talk about?
So I selected Miami by the Gun Club.
Come down to the willow garden with me. Come go with me. Come go and see. Though I howl across fields and my eyes turn gray, are yours still the same? Are you still the same? Carry home, I have returned through so many highways and so many tears. You let it never survive the heat of my hand.
Some stats on the band. From Los Angeles, California, they formed in 1979. This was released September 20th, 1982, and it is their second record. It was released on Animal Records, and the personnel on this album is Rob Ritter on bass, Terry Graham on drums, Ward Dotson on guitar, and Jeffrey Lee Pierce on vocals, guitar, and piano. We have some additional musicians on here. We have Mark Tomeo on steel guitar. We have Walter Stedding on fiddle. We have D.H. Lawrence, a.k.a. Debbie Harry, on backing vocals. And the album was produced by Chris Stein of Blondie, who also played bongos on the song Watermelon Man. Walter Stedding and Debbie Harry both also appear on Watermelon Man. And boy, I can't wait to talk about that song. But before we do that, what made you choose Miami for us to talk about?
Well, it's a really, really good record. It's an incredible record to me. Their first two records are this really interesting kind of document of a scene that is interesting in how it is very much a product of the time and place, but it also transcends it. And I got into this record. I didn't really get into them until like 2018 after I had moved to Phoenix. I thought the album cover was just so cool looking. That sickly green filter, whatever film stock they were using, palm trees in the background. And it's just a record that really resonated with me then. Is this kind of like out of tune, haunted, jangly country punk thing. It felt like it was tailor-made for me. You know, it was like a progression of my driving around listening to the Wipers at night. You know, it was driving around the desert in the blinding sun listening to Miami by the Gun Club. And I don't know, I guess why I picked this one, it's arguable. There's a case to be made that this isn't actually the one to do. The first record is probably the more important record, probably the more widely recognized record. But this one just particularly was one that I spent a lot of time with and was really inspired by. You know, I was trying to figure out how to write songs and do something not too far from this.
Yeah, it is funny. I can see some of the Gun Club's DNA in Major Ward's. Like, it's not a direct one-to-one, but I do hear a touch of it there.
It kind of like, it's in that world of like Hot Snakes, you know, and the Wipers. You know, that's really what I tie it to and where it kind of inspires a lot of things that I've tried to do.
I feel like if you took out like your other influences and if you were just like gonna jam the Gun Club and the Wipers together as like a direct, like, these are the two reference points we're making for this band, it could be pretty interesting sounding. And it would work, I think, really well. Yeah,
it's definitely something that I've thought of in the past, of just being like, if I were to just start another project, what would I narrow it down to?
Which I feel like is what
this kind of stuff would be in that. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like if you were to start another project, or if like you finally decide to wind this one down, whatever you moved on to next, I feel like should be a little more specific, you know? But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just going to make country records.
Right, just straight up, yeah. Hey,
but
yeah.
That'll happen later. We'll talk about it.
Yeah. My experience with the Gun Club is I've listened to this record before. I listened to the first record before. I maybe have heard the third record. I don't remember. If I have, it was like one time, and it didn't really stick out to me as much. Not done the full catalog. It's not a super long catalog, so it's doable, but yeah, I've not spent a ton of time with anything past the original 3 run that they did. Always enjoyed them, though. We've kind of threatened doing the Gun Club for a long time now. I feel like they get nominated a lot, especially this record and the first album. Like, I feel like we nominate them pretty frequently, but we never would pull the trigger on it. That pun was not intended, by the way. We're always like, should we say? One part of the problem was we didn't know where we should put them, because there's a time where I was like, should we stick them in with the Halloween Spectacular type stuff? And I think it would work there, but also it doesn't have to be there, which, to be fair, none of those records have to be there. We can cover them outside of the gimmick. We just tend to not. But
yeah, so that's the thing. Like, the aura of this record is spooky.
yeah.
But it's not about monsters and stuff, you know?
Yeah.
It doesn't really have that Halloween aesthetic.
No, not really.
So, yeah, it always felt like we could, but it's music that you can listen to any other time of the year. So,
Yeah, it's one of those things where it's like, are you going to listen to this outside of October and Halloween? Then why not cover it outside of that month too? Skaugust hasn't really quite made its way too many times outside of August, but we could. Yeah, we just have that special focus on it that it's like our chance to cover them. But yeah, so I've listened to the band. I've spent time with them. I guess we could kind of try and narrow down their sound before we do the Also Ran. So I think the number one genre people tend to apply to the Gun Club is punk blues. That's like the specific first thing people say. It's what Jeffrey Pierce specifically is influenced by going into this time period. So I get that is kind of the genre that gets the tag. You know, that's the one that people use the most. And I guess it's fair. When I think of blues punk, though, I'm not thinking of this. I'm thinking of like the 90s version of blues punk, like the John Spencer Blues Explosion and like all of that whole kind of thing. Or even like the Gits having like a bluesy singing style. You know, Mia Zapata's singing style is very bluesy. To me, like, I listen to this and I'm like, I don't hear a ton of actual blues, but it's there. It's just not it's not like B.B. King blues. It's like old blues, like Robert Johnson, you know, a lot more acoustic blues inspired than it's not so much John Lee Hooker, you know, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Bo Diddley.
Yeah, the punk blues name, it
Small.
feels much more, I don't know how much actual blues there really is on here. Like, they're not playing 12-bar blues. They're not playing, maybe there's a little ragtime influence.
Yeah, the sounds that I hear when I listen to this record, though, are more rockabilly and country influences than blues influences. They don't tend to get called psychobilly. Some people will like call them psychobilly, but they're not really very much. I guess sonically they're probably as psychobilly sounding as the Cramps were, if you really think about it. But
yeah. I mean, with psychobilly being this genre that it's a kind of a crossed wires thing where, yeah, the Gun Club does sound more like early Cramps than most of the immediate psychobilly bands of this era. You know, the ones that followed the Cramps and did something that was much more like the Stray Cats, you know, doing that UK rockabilly revival thing a little more overtly rather than being like, yeah, we just like retro stuff in general, which is kind of the Cramps' whole deal is because there's plenty of garage rock, early rock and roll influences that aren't, full on rockabilly. They're not doing Gene Vincent, they're just listening to old 50s rock and roll 45s.
And really a genre that's not, I don't see it applied to this band that often, but I feel like it should be, is cowpunk, which is like, it's punks doing country music, which is what the Gun Club is doing.
Yeah. So the Gun Club doesn't get that cowpunk tag. And there was another, I messaged you this week also saying that Rate Your Music doesn't want to recognize X as a cowpunk band either.
Yeah.
And despite the fact that I think of both as being LA cowpunk bands.
Right.
Like they were in the LA cowpunk scene.
Yeah.
That's what it was called. Like they're playing with the Blasters and Dwight Yoakam, you know?
And even cowpunk has a history of some like gothy stuff with like Blood on the Saddle being a cowpunk band, and their stuff being, you know, I guess it's more violent than horror theme, but still. Cowpunk I feel like is a forgotten genre term. Because it's like as soon as the word alt country became a thing, or even gothic country became a thing, no one used cowpunk anymore. And it was funny because I was listening to a podcast, You Don't Even Like This Band, and one of the band they're doing, or not even a band, the artist they're doing this season is John Mellencamp. And the host was trying to make an argument for how John Mellencamp may be like one of the first alt country musicians to like really make it big in the US. But they didn't really call it alt country at the time because they barely had alternative music at the time when it was a thing. And then my only problem with that argument is like, yeah, but cowpunk was alt country before alt country was a thing. Like cowpunk actually predates traditional alternative rock, you know, even though all of punk is just alternative rock, really.
Yeah. Yeah, but, I mean, to make it big. To actually be...
Big, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think there's a valid case for that, because if you look at somebody like Steve Earle, you know, I've told my wife, like, those first few Steve Earle records are just if Bruce Springsteen made full-on country records.
Yeah. He doesn't start alt.
I see John Mellencamp being, you know, a really early influence on Steve Earle.
Yeah.
Yeah, cowpunk, hit or miss in terms of where it gets applied. And in the case of X, I wouldn't fully define them as a cowpunk band. But at the same time, most people do call Social Distortion a cowpunk band.
From this era? Or even, I guess, from later eras more so,
really
right?
Later. You know, later Social Distortion more than anything. I mean, late 80s, like Prison Bound.
Yeah.
The Comeback. Not the Mommy's Little Monster, whatever the record's called.
Yeah.
Yeah, so other cowpunk and
yeah, right.
Particularly the bands that were related in the same scene. X, like I said, they put out Under the Big Black Sun. I don't know what... See, that record doesn't have a cowpunk tag on regular music. And, like, I was like, it has psychobilly on there. Like, half of the X records have psychobilly and rockabilly tags on them. It was like, if you put punk and rockabilly together, that's basically cowpunk.
They want to use two genres instead of one. It's like, we got to call it punk and rockabilly. It's like, that's what cowpunk is.
Yeah. The Flesh Eaters, Forever Came Today. Rank and File, Sundown. Not from LA, but not too far off either. Meat Puppets, self-titled record.
Yeah.
You've got your punk blues and maybe bluesy punk. The Birthday Party's Junkyard.
See,
Nick
that's
Cave,
what I think of when I think punk blues.
Yeah. I don't think that's too far off from the Gun Club.
Yeah. Which I guess even a lot more of just like Nick Cave's solo is what I'm thinking too, but that's even almost like a goth lounge act.
Yeah.
It's kind of how that band always felt to me.
Down Under, also.
Down Under.
Casablanca comes out. That's kind of, I think, towards the end of the first part of the Saints' career. I think immediately after this record, they kind of just almost fully lean into being like a new wave band. And then there's kind of some odds and ends of garage punk, you know, Flesh Tones. They put out 2 records. Red Cross, Born Innocent. It's like their first album.
We have a Flesh Tones and a Flesh Eaters record the same year.
Yeah. 2 Flesh Tones records.
Man, the Flesh Tones are weird.
Yeah. Like, that's even such a weird version of a garage punk band, because they're a garage punk band that is doing frat rock.
It's like an active party in the studio while they're recording an album. Is how how any songs I've heard from them, that's what they sound like. They sound like the Love Shack, you know, all the partying in Love Shack, just for the whole band.
Gothy, rockabilly-ish punk. The Lords of the New Church, almost a death rock band.
Yeah. Yeah, they are called horror punk, I think, sometimes, too. But they do feel more goth rocky. Or death rock really does feel like the genre for them.
A weird one, but somewhat related. Walls of Voodoo's Call of the West, Spaghetti Western New Wave.
I was going to say, it's new wave country music. Yeah.
It's a weird record.
It's a weird band.
Yeah.
Are they, what's their single?
Mexican Radio?
Their Mexican Radio? Okay, yeah. I always got them and Timbuk 3 mixed up with their singles. Timbuk 3, another weird band.
Yeah.
Both IRS bands, too, so it's not, like, that weird of a mix-up.
And, Walls of Voodoo, they're an LA band, too, so certainly not disconnected. Another related scene kind of going on in LA at the same time, and where there's a lot of crossover, and eventually that crossover and cross-pollination leads to, Concrete Blonde and even Mazzy Star.
Yeah.
Taking off from sort of that same scene. You've got the Paisley Underground stuff going on. So there's a Salvation Army record. There's a Dream Syndicate record, The Days of Wine and Roses. I didn't pull enough Paisley Underground up. There was probably some other stuff going on in 82. But that scene, you kind of get sort of just the Go-Go's? Aren't they?
Yeah, they're Paisley
Underground.
Yeah.
Connected.
And, Belinda Carlisle was hanging out with X and the Germs and all that stuff, so.
Yeah. I think there's a Game Theory record. That's the only other one. But that's kind of it in terms of the also-rans, other things that are kind of related.
Yeah, so as far as Animal Records in 1982 is concerned, we have Iggy Pop's Zombie Birdhouse, and then a bunch of shit you never heard of. We have James White and the Blacks. Oh, brother, what is that name?
They were James White. They were like a CBGB band.
Yeah, the album's called Sax Maniac. Sax Maniac. Get it? It's like Sax on the Beach.
The Blondies loved James White. They played with him all the time.
Yeah. There's a reason. And then there's Tav Falco's Panther Burns, Walter Stedding, who we mentioned as the violin player, and Snooky Tate. So Chris Stein produced albums in 1982. Not a lot of overlap because Chris Stein owned Animal Records. And it is just the Iggy Pop and the Snooky Tate records. So that's what else Chris Stein has done. Which explains why he would want James White on his label.
Over to my house, charm me from my kill. Across is far too much to bear, but you said you will. Now you look away, and leave me alone. I call the thunder, hands in the open sky. I call the thunder, to the wind in the open sky. To hear myself, to see myself. I call the thunder, I call the thunder. With tears home against your red dress.
All right, let's get into the story. So, Jeffrey Lee Pierce was born in Montebello, California, to a white union organizer father and a Mexican homemaker mother. He picked up the guitar and then moved to Granada Hills in the San Fernando Valley. And thoughts on Montebello, California? Have you been?
Montebello is next to East LA. So, yeah, I have been through it. I haven't gone anywhere in Montebello necessarily, but it's very close to Monterey Park. It's very close to, East LA.
So, Pierce was a fan of glam rock and prog, citing Sparks, Genesis, and Roxy Music as influences. 2 weeks in a row where Roxy Music cannot stop being an influence on who we're talking about. But he later becomes a fan of Bob Marley and even travels to Jamaica, where he says he met Winston Rodney, who is Burning Spear. He is the guy who makes all the Burning Spear records. And also, apparently, while he was there, got beat up. Pierce was also the president of the Blondie West Coast Fan Club and became friends with Chris Stein and Harry Stein. And then there's one story that Jeffrey Pierce is the one who gave Blondie the Nerves tape of Hanging on a Telephone. The story I heard was they were in a car, but I don't think the story ever mentioned that it was the guy from the gun club.
So, did Jeffrey copy his hair from Debbie, or did Debbie copy her hair from Jeffrey?
So that's a fun fact. They became friends, and Debbie sent him instructions on how to peroxide his hair. He learned how to do his hair directly from Debbie Harry herself.
Okay.
He also apparently, slept on her floor at one point. Like, I don't know if it was when they were recording this record, but there was a period, though, somehow, I guess being the president of their fan club, he then became actually friends with, like, all of Blondie, which is kind of wild. He later becomes a fan of the punk scene, and he starts writing for Slash magazine, and he's specifically focused on writing stories about punk, 30s blues, 50s rockabilly, and reggae. You know what's funny? He's super duper into reggae, but that's like the one thing that doesn't make it into the Gun Club.
Yeah.
He went to Jamaica because he loved reggae that much. So this is around the same time where he becomes a fan of roots music and he was also a supporter of the no wave movement because he thought that the punk scene was becoming too rigidly defined. And I do think early 80s LA hardcore and punk was very much getting defined into this one thing. But they do suggest that Pierce's interest in the blues came from his relationship with Canned Heat's Bob Haidt, who promised to let him come and take 10 albums from his house as he was dying. And then I was like, what? Was he dying from something long term? And, he was just friends with him. And so he said, after I die, you can come get this stuff. The way Bob Haidt died is they were playing a show. They took an intermission. I think they're doing like 2 sets. So they did one set. They stopped, did an intermission where someone offered him a vial of heroin, which he snorted and then went into a coma. And then the people he was with tried to revive him by giving him cocaine. Then roadies carried him out and he died en route to his bandmate's house. When did he tell him to come get those 10 records from his collection? While he's in a coma? Is he in the car? Is he lying? Did somebody else say you should come over and get some records after he died? Like, I don't understand this. The story doesn't make any sense. I just love the idea of being like, quick, he's overdosing. Give him some cocaine. Which is like, I guess it's not that different from using adrenaline to wake someone up, but also it's not the same thing as waking someone up with adrenaline. There's a lot of drugs in the Gun Club story too.
Yeah, I mean, that's not surprising.
Yeah. So Pierce encouraged his friend Brian Tristan to start playing guitar, and they formed a band together called Creeping Ritual. Brian Tristan would later become Kid Congo Powers. That name should be familiar to many of you. Tristan was also chief of the Ramones fan club. What?
The Gun Club is a fan club band.
They are that club in the name. I mean, they were originally called Creeping Ritual, but Pierce also played in a band called The Last, which was a pre-Descendants band that at some point featured Bill Stevenson, Carl Alvarez, and David Nolte at various points. Pierce was in the band when David Nolte was in the band. David Nolte also might be the least recognizable member of the Descendants. He's like a real early member who's like gone kind of quickly, but he was there. But it's funny that the other guys also came from that band too. And then he had a song. Pierce also has a songwriting credit to the song Group Sex by the Circle Jerks, because he was roommates with Keith Morrison. He was connected to everyone. So the initial formation of the band, it's Jeff Pierce on guitar and vocals, Kid Congo Powers on lead guitar. And that's it. They're a 2-piece when they start off. That's 1979. They add bassist Don Snowden, who was a music critic for the LA Times, and then a drummer named Brad Dunning. They changed their name to the Gun Club in April 1980 upon the suggestion of his roommate Keith Morrison. So Keith, I don't know if he suggested specifically the Gun Club or if he was like, Creeping Ritual is not good, come up with something else. But Keith Morrison was right. Gun Club is a much better name. So both Snowden and Dunning would leave in June of 1980. They then brought in Rob Ritter on bass and Terry Graham on drums, who had played in the early LA punk band The Bags, which would later be more well known as the Alice Bag Band. Rob Ritter was briefly replaced by bassist Anna Stedman for 2 months before he returned, and then Kid Congo leaves the Gun Club to join the Cramps. He would be replaced by guitarist Ward Dutson, who had hoped to get the gig with the Cramps. So, basically, our guy got stolen for the Cramps. Alright, who got second place for the Cramps?
Yeah, second string Cramps guitarist.
And really, when you hear this record, I hear a lot of Cramps guitar.
Yeah.
In here. Not the sliding stuff, but the, like, just more traditional riffs. Yeah. The Gun Club's sound has been described as tribal psychobilly blues. Okay, not sure what that means, but whatever. They released their debut album, Fire of Love, in 1981 on Ruby Records, which is a Slash imprint. And then the band signs to Animal Records in April of 1982. Chris Stein of Blondie was signed to Chrysalis with the rest of the band, and this was his imprint. So Chrysalis gave Chris Stein his own label to put out weird-ass records. And this is the first, if it's not the first record that was released on Animal, it's one of the first. It formed in 82, and there's like I mentioned the records that came out that year. I don't know which one was actually first and what month they came out, but first couple records. The label doesn't last long either. The label's over by like 86 or something like that. It's a short label. So the Gun Club relocates to New York City to record this album, because that's where Chris Stein was living. And it was recorded at Blank Tape Studios with engineers Butch Jones and Joe Arlotta. The album features a few covers. We have Run Through the Jungle. That's the Creedence Clearwater Revival song. We have John Hardy, which is a traditional song that was rearranged by Jeffrey Pierce. Then we have Fire of Love, which is a cover of the Jody Reynolds song. Funnily, the album title, Fire of Love, does not have the song Fire of Love on it. They were going to call the album Trigonometry, after a book about Old West gunfighters, which I kind of love, that stupid title. Like, the Gun Club's Trigonometry. That's funny.
That's such a bad name, though.
Yeah, I guess there's a book named that. That's what they got it from. But they went with the name Miami because Pierce loved seedy cities. He specifically liked Miami, Las Vegas, and New Orleans because these are the cities where the underbelly is the closest to the surface. Debauched cities is what he likes. And that kind of fits in with his whole gimmick and angle. This is a weird fact, too. Billy Idol was supposedly hanging around with Jeffrey Pierce during this time, too. And supposedly the song White Wedding is him trying to do his own version of the song Mother of Earth. I guess I could hear it in the riffs.
Yeah, a little bit.
Because the song doesn't sound like it, but the riff is kind of there. It's just like, how did this guy become friends with everyone? It's just very interesting. So this was released on vinyl and cassette initially. And Rob Ritter would leave the band immediately after the album was recorded and change his name to Rob Graves and form the band 45 Grave. He would teach his bass parts to former Bags bandmate Patricia Morrison as his replacement. Fun fact, she would go on to marry Dave Vanian of the Damned. Ward says... Married? Yeah, I think they are. I think they are still married. I think we looked that up. Because she came up on another... Oh, because she was in Sisters of Mercy. That's right. Which is like, what? What are you doing? How did the Gun Club spin off, so many other bands, too? What's funny is, Ward says the reason why Rob left is because he'd rather go have fun with his friends in another band than be successful in the Gun Club. And also, he could not stand Jeff. They do add a second guitarist, Annie Unger, for shows leading up to the record release. The album does come out in September, finally.
I'm just looking at pictures of Dave Vanian and Patricia Morrison.
Does it make sense? Is it one of those oh yeah, perfect?
Oh yeah. That's two people who dress like vampires on a daily basis.
Yeah. I do love that in that Sisters of Mercy things, she was in the band, but she wrote and played nothing on the record, right? Because he wouldn't let her, because he was just a control freak. They were just we need the hot goth chick in our band. Oh, we don't care what you play, though. So after an increase in frequent arguments between the band, Jeffrey Pierce decided to dismiss both Dotson and Graham from the band, meaning every single member of the Gun Club who played on this album is gone within 3 months after the album is actually released. And in Rob's case, he left before the album came out. Jeffrey Pierce is the only remaining member. Ward says that the band was much more collaborative at the time than Pierce gives credit for. He said, Jeff lied all the time, and just for the hell of it, because he thought it was funny. They said he could be charming when he wanted to, which made Ward dislike him even more. Jeff says Graham was siding with Ward in arguments, but Ward says that's not true. And then none of them could stand being in the band with him. Ward says he should have immediately started a band with Graham as soon as they were kicked out, but Ward went and played with his drug friends and then get kicked out of that band too. I also have a feeling that the fact that everybody's on drugs in this band probably isn't helping their ability to get along with each other, because it's just not a good mix, you know.
He's dead on the lawn of the house that he owned. What will they say about him? He had medals. He was in the war. What will they say about him?
Yeah, we'll talk about the artwork and lyrics and stuff like that a little bit later. But yeah, what are your thoughts on Miami? I mean, this is a record that you were very familiar with. So had it been a minute since you'd listened to it?
It's been a little bit. It may have been a couple of years, actually, since I've listened to this record. I still really like this record. It's just so cool. Like, it's like perfectly shitty. You know, it's such a difficult thing to pull off, this kind of like sloppiness, and have it not sound amateurish. You know, it's almost like, and what's really interesting, I think a great example of like what I'm getting at, their cover of Run Through the Jungle, when it starts and he's playing that riff, you're like, is this Run Through the Jungle or is this a ripoff of Run Through the Jungle?
And it's kind of both, because I don't know if I said this earlier, but he could not understand the lyrics to the first two verses of Run Through the Jungle, so he wrote new lyrics for them.
Yeah. So it is just like taking it and being like, it's like taking 2/3 of the song.
Yeah.
You know, and like the way that he plays the guitar riff, it's not right. Like he's off somewhere.
Which I guess it's Ward. I don't know who. So if you read through the liner notes of the album, for some reason, Jeffrey is only credited as playing like guitar on like 2 or 3 songs on the record and not the whole album. But he was the band's, like, he was a guitarist in the band, but he wasn't like considered the lead guitarist. So I don't know who is the one doing the riff wrong, if it's Jeff or if it's Ward doing it wrong.
Yeah. But the way they do that, playing the guitar riff wrong, it's like they're just approximating what they heard. And
it's probably by ear.
And yeah, it would be by ear. I'm sure they didn't go find a
sheet music for it.
There wouldn't be a tab book for it.
There might be sheet music, but I bet you they can't read music, though. Some of them, at least.
Yeah, and I mean, it's just going to be the chords and the melody, you know?
Yeah.
And so there's this, like, it's almost like they are playing their own scale, because the way he sings is not in tune. But it's so consistently not in tune that it sounds intentional and just sounds weird and different. It's like hearing an Arabic scale or a Chinese scale, where it's just like the scale degrees are a little bit different, or hearing like some modal, you know, I don't remember all the modes, Ionian, no, Lycrian or something, you know, one of those other classical modes where the scale degrees are changed and so they sound wrong because you're so used to the major minor scale. And then, you know, we have like, most people's ears are pretty used to a blues scale or a country scale, but like then you can get a little bit more modal if you get out into like British folk music, and like then it starts to sound a little weirder, and that's kind of where this sits in that sort of like, I don't think that's the right note, but he's singing the same one every time, the same wrong note every time.
It is funny how it's like the whatever scale that most American music is kind of, you know, based on, was more designed to just sound as like nice together as possible. And it is funny, right? Whenever you do listen to some of those like other scales from other places where you're just like, what is this? Everything sounds weird and wrong and just, or like atonal in some ways, but it's like, no, it's just you're just used to how it sounds one way, really.
Yeah. I mean, you know, it usually isn't like wildly unpleasant, but it always has that sort of like hole in it. You know, it has this sort of like, there's an emptiness or things feel stretched. So like that's what I feel like is happening with the music on this record is everything is just a little stretched. And it's like maybe it's a mix of the drugs, maybe it's a mix of the drugs and the blues influences, and just kind of like diminishing and augmenting the blues even more. But it sounds so interesting in this like gripping way. And it's like a kind of lethargic record, you know? It's a tired sounding record. So it's surprising that it hooks as well as it does. I will say as a record, it's more than the sum of its parts. It definitely has its flaws and things that I don't like about it, but it leaves you with this presence. It's a haunting record.
Some would say spooky. Yeah. So I love this record. I had a really good time listening to it again. You know, it's been a few years since I listened to it. I probably didn't listen to it until we had started the show. So it was a band that like I'd always seen their name, but I never really listened to myself. And then when I finally got into them, you know, I listened to this one. I probably listened to this one first, and then I went back to the first record. Yeah, I've enjoyed it. It's been a while though since I listened to, so I was excited to do it because we talked about doing Gun Club forever, and finally we were really going to do it. And it was like the one of the two that I listened to the more. Like I listened to Miami more than I listened to the first album. So yeah, I just had a really good time kind of coming back to it, listening to it a few times throughout the week. You know, I think 3 times is my minimum if I can. And it was a really enjoyable record. I do think overall it sounds just really cool. Like you said, everything about them is just like cool in general. Like it's a neat mixture of sounds with a punk aesthetic, and there's like a post-punkiness to it as well. That comes from, I guess, maybe some of the sparseness. I guess my only real criticisms for this record are, I don't think they need the covers. Like, I don't think we need 3 covers on this record. One is like not that well known, and one's a traditional. Which, by the way, his version of John Hardy is funny because it's like, it's too many words and out of his range, and so he's like really stretching to sing and like hit those notes, and like you could tell he's straining to get there, and I don't think he's like getting there really, but there is something kind of cool about that too. It is funny whenever like not successfully getting it right is almost more interesting and more satisfying to listen to than if they were to get it like spot on, perfect, faithful, you know?
Yeah, it's The Cure's entire career. I have this idiom, I guess, that I've coined for myself, which is very much my reaction to like the tendency of commercial music and the further commercialization of alternative music and the things that I don't like about modern production, and one of those being the over-reliance on vocal tuning. And the term that I think of this phrase when I notice the vocal tuning on a record is, I call it tuning the Cure. You wouldn't do that.
Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah.
You would not touch Robert's vocals in a million years. No one would think to correct. And I just think of like what fucking like Cro-Magnon man who's sitting there with Melodyne tuning every fucking vocal into oblivion would do to a Cure vocal. I'm like, you shouldn't be allowed to make music. You shouldn't be allowed to produce music. Like, that's, your hands are cut off. Like,
you know, I listened to this week, Scott Mellinger of Zayo was on 100 Words or Less. And funnily, like, the emphasis and the focus of that interview was actually about Creationist Crucifixion, which goes along with the fact that band keeps coming up in our Discord for some reason lately. Like, they've got, like, dropped, like, 3 times as a reference point. It's like, why are we talking about Creationist Crucifixion so much? Whatever. But yeah, the emphasis of the piece was, like, the interview was to talk more about that and, like, Scott joining Zayo. But one of the things he was talking about is how when they recorded with Steve Albini is that his thinking was, like, music is live. Like, the idea of music is you're supposed to play it live. So a recording should be trying to capture what you are like live in its best form. You know, like it's best recorded form where you can hear kind of what's going on a little bit more. And I've been thinking that lately. It's just like music is live and music played live is very rarely note for note perfect album. And really, when you see those bands who are note for note album perfect live, they're kind of boring. They're not as exciting to see. So I really like the idea of being like, oh yeah, a bunch of mistakes made its way onto the record, but it's cool. Because there's a bunch of different mistakes when you play it live almost every single night. So I do kind of like that, capturing the warts and all of a band is, to me, way more interesting than just like sitting there and just being like, it has to be perfect. We have to hit every note perfectly. We have to hit every riff and chord has to be played. Every drum hit has to be perfect. Like, no, just give me a live feel in a recording setting, like a well-recorded setting. You know, I don't want just like only live in studio records, you know?
Yeah. I'm not fundamentally against using, compression and doing overdubs. And, you could definitely go down a whole rabbit trail of being like such a purist that you're just like, oh, what, you can't do anything to correct.
Yeah.
Your recordings. It's like, oh, you only get one take, are we going to do the,
yeah,
But yeah, I mean, it's like that thought of a recording as a documentation of a performance. That is something that's really fundamental to like what I like in production and what I like in music and what I look for a lot of times in music, and where I find stuff like the Gun Club, this record being like, this is a fucked up sounding band. Like, these are just fucked up sounding musicians, and this is what they make. And they don't sound right, and they don't play right. And that's really cool, because it's still interesting and engaging. And it's like, there's definitely, like, great effort that certain musicians have gone to in terms of, like, intentionally muddying up their sound. And there's people like, someone like Brian Eno, who's just so, like, I'm going to let the tape loops do weird, whatever random shit they want to do. And I'm going to call that music. You can get into that generative kind of process of music, or you can be somebody like, Archers of Loaf, just being like coming up with weird guitar tunings and just kind of sort of manufacturing a level of sloppiness. But yeah, I think that like just trying to record something honest is what I'm interested in. And, it's like CCR, a really good direct influence on the Gun Club. They do the cover on here. And it's like, I've gone and listened to those CCR records a ton really critically, like trying to draw a lot of production inspiration from them and thinking about like, those are kind of almost fully recorded live records, and they're pristine playing, because playing in CCR was like being in the military. Yeah. They were the most practiced band ever, probably.
Well, they also come from an era too where it mattered a lot more. Like, that was just the industry standard, was to just be as good as you possibly can. Which should be everybody's goal, is to be as good as possible. But like, as far as like getting it perfect, playing it a million times, but the business side of it,
but it's like, there still are like, some of the tom hits are quieter, or it's not perfect. It's an honest performance. That is what they actually sounded like. And kind of the flip side of the coin, like the band doing records in around the same time, 69 and 70, and just being like, we learned the song one day and recorded it the next. And that's its own kind of like live document sort of, approach to recording.
Anytime like a song is written in studio, it's often, by the time it gets played live a bunch of times, it mutates.
Yeah.
And so like a lot of times they'll be like, you've seen bands where they're just like, oh yeah, we added like a whole extra guitar part to the song because we just felt like it was missing something all along, but we weren't in the studio long enough to like figure out what was missing. And then it's not until after we played it, like 50 times in a year, that we're like, what if we added this? And everybody's like, oh, that makes it so much better. So, yeah. I do think an album can work as like a snapshot of the band at that particular moment. And with Gun Club, it's like a completely different makeup on every record. you know?
Yeah, right. This is the one without Kid Congo powers.
Yeah.
So it's like this really important member of the band is not on this record.
Yeah.
And all these other people that are on the record aren't on anything else.
Right. Yeah, because everybody on this record specifically, they don't come back.
I mean, Congo Powers comes back, right?
Yeah, in the 90s, I think. But yeah.
So, yeah, it very much is, like, you know, by default, a snapshot of a moment.
Yeah, I think this record has a lot of standout songs on it. You know, I definitely think that it starts off really strong with the first two tracks, you know, Carry Home and Light Calling Up Thunder. Oh, Brother and Sister, too. I think that's another really, like, the first three tracks are just brilliant songs. Run Through the Jungle is a fun cover. If I was going to cut all but one cover, I would probably keep the CCR and drop John Hardy and Fire of Love. Though people seem to love the Fire of Love on here, I thought it's fine. That one sounded like a Cramp song to me. I mean, even though it's a cover too, but for me, my absolute favorite song on this record is Texas Serenade. That is the sixth track on the album. It's a slower, mid-paced kind of song. It's got a ton of slide guitar on it. I loved that song. That to me is like the standout of the record. It's the one that I'm just like, wow, this is so good. And then I think it hits a slump. I think Watermelon Man is the worst song on the record. It's also the one with both members of Blondie on it. I just didn't like it. It's one of those songs that's just like, oh, I guarantee you this song is more fun to play than it is to listen to. You ever jam on something and you're like, yeah, that's fun to jam on, but you wouldn't record it because you'd just be like, I don't know if it'd be actually a good song. I just had fun jamming on it, you know? I feel like Watermelon Man's like that. That's my least favorite song on the whole record. I think that's pretty bad. What's it about? The Watermelon Man. He's gonna smile for you. That's it. Bad Indian, I think, is like a fine song, but it has weirdly, vaguely racist lyrics. I guess we could do the lyric section next. It's like it's about a woman, but like she's like a bad Indian is the metaphor that he's using, and it's like with a necklace made of eyeballs, and you're doing your war dance, and it's just like a bunch of just like stereotypical like native things that he's just like. That's a weird one. I don't quite get what he's trying to say with that song. That's one where I was just like, yeah, just some mild, soft racism. But I guess
yeah, it's not great.
Yeah,
I do think that's like kind of one of the bad marks of this record is it does fall into that problematic exoticism and like being so retro that it does harken back to, you know, just full on racist, you know,
yeah,
cowboys and Indians kind of like Western sensibilities. So yeah, it that's always been that thing too with a lot of the garage stuff and punk blues stuff where there's often toes that line.
Yeah. Other lyrics while we're here. Texas Serenade. I'm not entirely sure who the song is about, but it's about like somebody dying on their lawn and like some Pierce. Like one of the things he's like, what will they say about him is like one of the main things he kind of repeats a lot. And one of them was like, one of the lines is like, hope they don't ask me. Cause the idea is that he doesn't know anything about him, even though, so I kind of took that as to being like, it's a neighbor or something that died on their lawn, but he didn't actually know him very well. So that's kind of how it feels. It does mention dad, like father and dad in it a bunch. Maybe it's about his father. I don't know exactly who it's about or what specifically it's about, but it could be taken several ways. And then Brother Sister is about Set and Osiris from Egyptian mythology. And it like basically just tells their story. And then there's like a line in there of like, I'm your brother, I'm your lover, because that was like a thing that the Egyptian royalty did, was they just kept the bloodline pure. And so that's why that line's in there. I'm sure he put it in there too, because he's like, that'll sound gross. People won't like that line. But a lot of just like imagery and a lot of the rest of the lyrics though, and a lot of songs that I'm just like, I don't know if there's actually a message here. I think it's just like these words sound cool and they conjure a specific image in your head. And I think that's kind of what a lot of the lyrics are based on. But you mentioned some stuff that doesn't work for you. Like I mentioned Watermelon Man doesn't work for me and Bad Ending doesn't work. Do you have anything else that doesn't work for you?
I think those are the things that work the least for me as well.
I think it's a touch too long as well.
Watermelon Man kind of is a little too long, but it does at least I think it fits with the aura of the record, and so it sustains that, I guess. But it is maybe it's a little expendable,
Yeah. Like I said, I would maybe cut one or two of the covers and maybe Watermelon Man, and I think I would tighten it up just a little bit. It kind of makes the back half drag a little bit to me, and I feel like those last two songs are too good to be after those other songs, so yeah. I think it's a sequencing issue too. Maybe a sequencing could fix it, because it's very front-heavy. It's a very front-heavy album, so I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, that first 6 songs on this record.
Yeah, Side A is strong.
Killer.
Yeah. Maybe that's just a nature of, vinyl in flipping sides, where they're just like, sequence the first half really strong, which is an approach. I personally would rather have a balanced record more so, though, because you want to give people a reason to flip it. You don't want them just to listen to side A and then not flip to side B ever. So you need to give them some stuff on side B that they want to hear, I didn't find a ton of reviews from the time period. I did Enemy included on their 1982 album of the year list. I couldn't figure out if that list was compiled in 1982 or if it was compiled in 2016 whenever it was pulled from the website. I couldn't tell. But AllMusic, there's a quote from it here that says, off the bat, the disc suffers from a thin mix. Going for a rougher sound, Stein left the instruments at one level and boosted Pierce's vocal. There's plenty of guitar here, screaming and moping like a drunken orphan from the Texas flatlands, but next to its predecessor, it sounds drier and reedier. The songs here centered themselves on a mutant form of country music that met the post-punk ethos in the desert, fought and blooded each other, and decided to stay together. This is hardcore snake-charming music, and as in water moccasins, not cobras. Evil, smoky, brash, and libidinally uttered. AllMusic reviews. Weird. Why are they so weird? Then Trouser Press had this little thing to say. Miami, which gave Pierce the chance to live the dream of singing with Debbie Harry, is both jumbled and dispirited. It includes a little folk, country, and pop rock without diluting the strength one whit, not even via harmony vocalizing. Producer and animal magnate Chris Stein does procure a clearer sound, cleansing Dotson's slide guitar of its grit, although bringing Pierce's generally strong Jim Morrison-style vocals to the front of the mix does focus attention on his disconcerting tendency to hit notes sharp. Yeah, so kind of mentioning the off-key stuff. The production is a big complaint about this record. People are like, why is the music so buried and the vocals so high in the mix? And I went from listening to one record right before this one and then listening to it again. And when I turned it on, the vocals were... once you listen to it next to other music, you're like, these vocals are way high in the mix. Almost peaking. It's really hot in the mix. I had to turn it down.
Yeah, I understand what people are saying, but I kind of like that. It makes the vocals feel so much more vulnerable. Because,
yeah.
And I mean, you could certainly, you can could have faded more. And I would say this mix is pretty hands-off and very much set and forget your balance and levels. There's not much fading vocals up and down or, dropping out any instruments on particular parts. But he essentially just, in taking that sort of set it and forget it level, to get those really quiet moments in the vocals, they're going to have to be way up in the mix. So, but at the same time, taking, even in that practical and maybe arguably lazy approach to mixing, there's the unintended effect, or maybe it's something they kind of realized in mixing it, that they were like, hey, this actually kind of has a vibe to it, where to me, what it feels like is it makes the music especially a lot of the guitar playing, which is pretty wet, and there's a lot of reverb on this record. It makes all of that like ambience and feel more like a pad than it is necessarily like driving guitar riffs. I like how distant the guitars sound. I think that this would not have as much of that haunting, hypnotic sort of sound if the guitars were more up front, if the drums were punchier. You can hear the bass playing really well on this record, though.
True.
Which does really help to carry the rhythm and give it a little more drive. But I don't know that I will. I don't think I want this record remixed. I do like I said, I like how it's the right kind of shitty.
You know what, too? I think you're right. The haunting is the perfect word to use, because if it's higher in the mix, then it doesn't give that haunting quality as well. So like having it kind of be, I'm not going to say it's faint, because it's pretty clear. You can still hear it. It's just the vocals are just louder. But it does give it like a far off feeling, which that does kind of add to that haunting, you know. Hearing a slide guitar in the distance would probably sound pretty scary if you actually encounter that in real life. And I kind of do like that tone is there. Also, I was thinking, too, it's like Chris Stein has been working with Debbie Harry forever. Debbie Harry is the star of those Blondie records. Like, yes, everyone in that band is a phenomenal musician. Like, everyone in that band was a brilliant musician. And it was a collective effort. But they knew that Debbie was the star. And Debbie is higher in the mix on all those Blondie records. So I guarantee you it's just a case of he comes from a world where the vocals are just high. They're really high in the mix.
Yeah.
And that's why he put Jeff in the mix. Also, Jeff's voice is interesting.
Yeah.
I wouldn't, you know. Sean Bonnet from AJJ says, make sure your vocals are high enough in the mix that people can make out your lyrics in your songs.
Yeah.
Which I think is important, especially if you want people to be able to sing along with stuff that you're writing. Maybe the Gun Club doesn't care about people singing along or not, but because why would you? Some of there's a lot of just wild yelping, you know, like not that much singing along, but
yeah. I don't know. I think the vocals sitting high in the mix, it's kind of going back to The Cure, you know, if you buried those vocals too much, like it makes that pitchiness sound less intentional. What it sounds like to me when you mix vocals high like this and they're pitchy and is saying, we know.
Yeah.
We know he's not singing the right notes. We know it's off. That's the point.
Yeah.
To some degree. Like that's part of it. And what it sounds like to me when you take pitchy vocals and you bury them in the mix, it sounds like you know and you're ashamed.
You're hiding him.
You're trying to hide it. I couldn't get a better take. This is what we got to live with. And I have to do that when I'm mixing. I have to be like, yeah, that's not perfect, but if I bury it, I'm hiding it. You know?
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a case of being like, kind of going back to our recording a live setting to album. And I'm not saying that like you can't just redo your takes. I'm not a one and done type of person. But if it's one of those songs that you're like, oh, I can nail this live, and just for some reason in the studio I've been messing up, then yeah, maybe I would try until you could nail it. Like if you can do it live, then yeah, try and get it in the studio. If it's one of those things where you're just like, I've never hit this live, maybe work on it and see why not. You know, try and figure out what can make it work. But also, sometimes maybe, you're like, me not being able to hit this is why I like it, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's, it depends on the song. It's, you know.
Right. The song and the band and the style and everything. Yeah. Ton of factors.
But yeah, I think it's a vulnerability, you know? It's the not making something perfect and letting it be wrong and letting it have some mistakes is part of the performance. And I think certainly, like, if you're influenced by the blues, like, that's definitely just recognizing where that music comes from and just being like, yeah, these guitars, if you're listening to a lot of 30s blues records, then this is not off-putting to you at all.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, because those things sound like shit. Like, they're recorded terribly just because of the limitations of the equipment at the time, and on top of not having money to record much. Yeah.
You're playing and singing at the same time into basically a big cone with a piece of foil in it.
Well, let's do the aftermath. So, They go on to release 5 more studio albums: The Las Vegas Story in 1984, Mother Juno in 1987, Pastoral Hide and Seek in 1990, Divinity in 91, and Lucky Jim in 1993. Rob Ritter would pass away from an overdose in 1990, and Courtney Love dedicated Holes Pretty on the Inside to him. Why did she do that? I don't know. I don't know if he met her or what. But Ward Dodson would go on to play in the Pontiac Brothers and Liquor Giants. And Jeffrey Lee Pierce would pass away in 1996 after being found unconscious at his father's home in Salt Lake City. And he died from cerebral hemorrhaging. I couldn't really find an exact reason why he died. Like, why he was unconscious. He was a heroin addict, but you don't get brain damage. You're not getting like a head injury from that. So,
I mean, if you'd overdosed and passed out.
I guess if you passed out and fell and hit your head, I guess that's it. Maybe he passed out and hit his head. It could be what it is. He never got sober. Like
tripped and yeah.
He never got sober. Sadly, it seems like a lot of them didn't. Yeah, so it's one of those things where it's like, who knows where he would have gone, with, I could see the Gun Club still being a band today because it was already just him. So it would just be a thing as long as he would have wanted to keep doing it himself. So very curious to see what would have happened in the future had he lived. But, it's part of the story though, there is a timeline that the Gun Club ceases to be entirely. So noteworthy. Well, let's rate it and get out of here. What do you, did we win?
Yes, for sure.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, for sure. Rating wise, I'll give it, I'm at a 4.0. A good 4.0 for me.
I'm like a 4.5.
Yeah.
I think this is just such a special record.
It is. I think it is too. And I think
I really like the first record. I haven't gone past this one really. I don't.
Yeah.
But I like the first record for very different reasons. That feels more like a Cramps record.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I think that will do it for us. So, we appreciate each and every one of you for listening, and you can follow us anywhere on social media at punklautopod, punklautopod@gmail.com, and our voicemail line, 202-688-PUNK. And, yeah, where can we find you, Dylan?
You can find me at Husker Dylan, most places on the internet, and Major Awards Band. The next Major Awards single coming out on May 29th. So very soon. Mm-hmm. And we'll be playing a show on that Sunday, May 31st at Oblivion in Los Angeles. So if you're in LA, come out.
Yeah, and if you're listening to this episode when it drops, that'll be a week and a half. So not the coming Friday, but the Friday after that the new song will drop. So be on the lookout for that. And we'll remind you again next week to go check it out. But, all right, everyone. Thank you so much for listening. We appreciate you, and we will talk to you next time.
To order Punk, call the number on your screen. Rush delivery is available. Remember, this special offer is not sold in stores.